The next item of business is a statement by Humza Yousaf on Gaza and Israel. The First Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there are many things, of course, that we disagree with in this chamber. But at times of grief and sorrow, we have often found a way of putting those differences aside and coming together. Even on the issue of Israel and Palestine, where passions run high, as do differences of opinion, we can and we should unite on many issues. Firstly, let us unite in unequivocally condemning the terror Hamas unleashed on the 7th of October in southern Israel. The more we learn about Hamas's barbaric attack, which took place on the Jewish Sabbath, on a Jewish holy day, the more we are sickened by their brutality. The Scottish Government unequivocally condemns the abhorrent terrorist attacks of Hamas. And let me say, as someone who is proudly Muslim, that I was taught from a young age that Islam tells us that if you kill one innocent person, it is as if you've killed the whole of humanity. There can be no religious or moral defence of the killing of innocent civilians. Israel, like every other country in the world, has a right to protect itself from terror. And that, of course, must be done within the confines of international law, an issue I will return to later. The Scottish Government also joins with the international community in calling for hostages taken by Hamas to be released immediately and unconditionally. Secondly, let this chamber unite in our common humanity, in accepting that there is no hierarchy of grief, that when a mother loses a child, then we all feel that pain, we all feel that hurt, we all feel that sorrow, whether that mother is Israeli or Palestinian. I certainly felt that pain when I met with Irene Cowan, the mother of Bernard Cowan, who was killed by Hamas. Irene and I, we held each other, we cried, we shared in each other's grief. She is an incredible woman who, despite her own heartache, told me that she was praying for my in-laws and for all the innocent men, women and children who were trapped in Gaza. So let us agree that too many mothers and fathers have lost their children, and too many children have become orphaned. And that is why we need an immediate ceasefire, and an immediate ceasefire must be agreed to. Thirdly, Presiding Officer, let us all unite in saying clearly that the overwhelming majority of men, women and children in Gaza have nothing to do with Hamas, and they must not be punished for Hamas's crimes. Almost 60% of Gazans are under the age of 25. Almost half of the population of Gaza are children. Cutting off electricity, food, water, fuel supplies to the people of Gaza is collective punishment, and it must be condemned in the strongest possible manner. International law must always, and especially when it is difficult, must be respected. The Scottish Government calls on all sides to agree to an immediate ceasefire, to allow the humanitarian corridor to open and for supplies to get into Gaza, as well as allowing those who want to leave safe passage out. UN agencies described the humanitarian situation in Gaza as desperate before the war. They now call the situation catastrophic. Today, premature babies, injured infants, pregnant women, and all the people who have lost their homes overnight in Gaza have little in the way of access to clean water. They cannot make bread. Many are in desperate need of sufficient medical treatment for horrendous injuries and have virtually no access to life-saving medicine. The aid, the trickle of aid, arriving in Gaza must be significantly increased without delay. And, Presiding Officer, it must include fuel. Otherwise, hospitals will simply shut down. The sick, the injured, premature babies, they will die, Presiding Officer. And if that happens, it will be a stain on all of our collective consciousness, and it's one that we should not be forgiven for. On the humanitarian effort that is now required, Scotland stands ready to do our part The Scottish Government has already pledged £500,000 in humanitarian funding to the UN's Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, to help displaced people in Gaza. Presiding Officer, the Palestinian people are proud people. They're proud of their culture. They're proud of their history. They're proud of their land. They should not be forced to leave. However, we know that this conflict alone has meant that 1 million people in Gaza have already been displaced. Therefore, for those who wish to leave, I reiterate my call on the international community to commit to a worldwide refugee programme for the people of Gaza, particularly women and children. And I will continue to call on the UK Government to begin work on both the creation of a refugee resettlement scheme and on plans for medical evacuation of injured civilians in Gaza. As I've said before, Scotland is willing to play her part and be the first country in the UK to offer safe sanctuary to vulnerable people caught up in this war. Scotland is ready to treat the injured men, women and children of Gaza in our hospitals where we can. In the past, the people of Scotland, and indeed right across the UK, have opened our hearts, our homes, and welcomed those from Syria, Ukraine and many other countries. We are a generous nation. Let us show that generosity of spirit and heart once again. Presiding Officer, I am greatly concerned by the plight of British citizens who are captured as hostages by Hamas. I reiterate our call for them to be released. I'm also deeply distressed thinking of Scots who are trapped in Gaza. British citizens, including children and the elderly, who have called Scotland their home for decades and are trapped within the Gaza Strip, waiting to cross safely into Egypt. And of course, there is the plight of my own in-laws. Let me thank members from across the chamber who have sent kind messages of support, of solidarity, who have told me that our family is in your prayers. Your words have been of great comfort to me and to Nadia. And every night, Presiding Officer, Nadia and I go to bed barely sleeping as we count down the hours until the morning, waiting anxiously for a message from my mother-in-law to tell us that they have survived the night. Throughout the day, the 100 people who are in our family home, well, they must ration their food. The adults barely eat. My mother-in-law, she only ate cashew nuts yesterday. They ration so the children in the house don't end up malnourished. But time is running out. I spoke to my mother-in-law this morning. She feels helpless. She has lost hope. She tells me she feels as if the UK government has forgotten about her. And please don't interpret my point as a political one. It's not. She is a UK citizen. Yet the only communication that she receives from the Foreign Office is a text message telling her what she already knows, that the Rafah crossing is closed. What she needs is the UK government, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary to spend every minute of every day demanding that their allies in Egypt and Israel open the Rafah crossing, and open it now, to allow those UK citizens, all of them, who are trapped in Gaza, safe passage, and for them to return home to their families. I made this very point to the Prime Minister this afternoon when we spoke on the phone, and reiterated the Scottish Government's call for a ceasefire, for more aid, including fuel, to be allowed into Gaza, and of course reiterated that the Prime Minister has our full support in everything he is doing to bring British hostages back home. And in the meantime, I have a wife who really wants to hug her mum and dad. I have 2 girls who really miss their granny and their granddad. And they just want to know, like many other families across the country, when they'll come home. And I'm afraid, Presiding Officer, it's a question I simply do not know the answer to. Presiding Officer, too many innocent men, women and children are suffering. We can't allow this conflict to create new tensions in our own peaceful communities in Scotland, or indeed elsewhere in the world. There has to be, there must be, zero tolerance for anti-Semitism, for Islamophobia, for sectarian violence of any kind, anywhere. Scotland's Jewish, Muslim, Palestinian communities are communities I love. They're ones I've grown up with. They're ones whose pain and sorrow I share. As long as I'm First Minister, let me be abundantly clear, and I'm sure I can speak for the entire chamber, that there is no room for anti-Semitism, for Islamophobia, or hatred of any kind here in Scotland. I am steadfast in my commitment to solidarity and to our strong tradition of inclusion and interfaith working across Scotland. I was pleased to be able to bring together senior rabbis and imams to put their name to a joint statement, clearly stating that they will not be divided and they stand together against hatred in any form. We all know that there are those who say that violence is inevitable, it's an eternal constant of our human condition. They're wrong. The human capacity to love is far greater. Only days before Hamas's horrific attacks, thousands of women from the Israeli movement Women Wage Peace and the Palestinian movement Women of the Sun, they held a joint march for peace on the 4th of October, demanding an end to the historic cycle of bloodshed. After Hamas's attacks on the 7th of October, Women Wage Peace issued the following statement, and I quote, "Every mother, Jewish and Arab, gives birth to her children to see them grow and flourish, not to bury them. That's why, even today, amid the pain and the feeling that the belief in peace has collapsed, we extend a hand in peace to the mothers of Gaza and the West Bank." It's time that the whole world listens to Women of the Sun and to Women Wage Peace and other voices to reduce armed conflict, to promote equality, to protect the vulnerable, so that humanity can unite to overcome violence and hatred, and so that every mother can see her children grow up safely. Surely that's something that every Palestinian and every Israeli deserves. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government reiterates our call for hostages to be released, for an immediate ceasefire, for an end to collective punishment, for more aid, including fuel, to be allowed into Gaza, and for those who want to leave, particularly foreign nationals, to be given safe passage to do so. Let us hope together, let us pray that humanity prevails.
Thank you.